Hello and welcome to my channel NBSoundhopperUK, and the subject of this video will be 10 Audible albums. So what's an Audible album? The answer to that probably varies from person to person. From my perspective, there are several types. One is an album that is completely detached from recognised genre at the time it was recorded. Another is where there are elements of recognised genre, but the approach used is so unusual as to make it extraordinary. Others, where the artist seemingly has little or no self-awareness and comes out with something that is almost comical by accident. There's more for sure, but the three types I've described give a general idea of what I regard as an oddball album. The next question is, well, what's the point of listening to this stuff? My answer, because it exists. I don't think it's necessary that music should be elitist on the grounds of popularity, musicianship, or the idea that any one genre is intrinsically better than any other. Oddball albums sit outside all of those notions. Unlike my earlier videos, I'm not going to rank these albums, simply present them in chronological order. Without further ado, though, on to the nitty-gritty 10 Audible albums. First up is Music to Suffer By Leona Anderson. Destroying classic songs is nothing new. It wasn't invented by punk bands in 1976 or 1977. First released in 1957, Music to Suffer By is an album where Leona Anderson's singing is enough to make you wince. She was originally a silent movie actress, but in the 1950s turned to making a comedy act out of her terrible voice. It was all deliberate, but she did an admirable job. People in the UK over the age of 45 will probably remember comedian Les Dawson's act where he played piano and littered the songs with bum notes. If only Leona Anderson had lived long enough, she and Les Dawson could have made a formidable team. On Music to Suffer By, tracks like Rats in My Room, I Love Paris, Limburger Lover, Het Cat and Chloe all torture your ears, but my favourite is Indian Love Call, where the final hit on the snare drum is like a gunshot. Symbolically, someone is being put out of their misery. Whether that's Leona Anderson or the listener is open to debate. The takeaway from this album, though, is that to deliberately do something badly takes a fair amount of skill. Second is The Transformed Man by William Shatner. In 1968, at the height of his fame with Star Trek, William Shatner decided to have a go at making an album. The Transformed Man consists of 6 pieces, the majority of which are readings from classic literature such as Hamlet and Cyrano de Bergerac, followed by a contemporary pop song, including covers of Mr. Tambourine Man and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Now, the thing is with the songs is that William Shatner doesn't actually sing them. Any singing is done by a backing group. Instead of singing the lyrics, he reads them in full thespian mode. What you can't tell is whether William Shatner is just having a laugh or if he's deadly serious. And it's this uncertainty that makes The Transformed Man a compelling and funny listen. The highlight of the album for me is the despairing cry of Mr. Tambourine Man at the end of that track. One of my favourite moments from any cover version I've ever heard. Third is An Electric Storm by White Noise. White Noise was the combination of David Vorhaus, originally a classical bass player, plus Delia Derbyshire and Brian Hodgson from the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. With An Electric Storm, they put together an album combining contemporary 1960s pop and experimental electronic sounds, tape loops, and to a limited extent, early synthesizers. Sides 1 and 2, or phase in and phase out as they are referred to, are two very different animals. Phase in is mostly pop songs with electronically treated conventional instruments and assorted loops, including one on My Game of Loving containing a certain amount of ecstatic grunting. Phase out is very experimental and dark for its time. Whilst the 11-minute track The Visitation does include some vocals, it's an electronic tale of a distraught woman's encounter with the ghost of her dead lover. Final track Black Mass, Electronic Storm in Hell had to be recorded in a day due to record company patience running out waiting for a finished product. For the most part, it's a drum solo with heavy usage of stereo panning, the screams of souls in torment, and harsher electronic sounds. Commercially, this album did nothing when released. Maybe that's no surprise, as this album would have been strange for listeners in 1969. However, the number of electronic artists who have since mentioned it as an influence goes to show how far ahead of its time it was. Fourth is Metal Machine Music by Lou Reed, a double album from 1975 containing 4 tracks with not much more than continuous feedback where the pitch is altered slightly from track to track. It's an album which bears all the hallmarks of one recorded to fulfill a record contract, and it's one which is hated by a great many people. However, there are a lot of people who see it as groundbreaking and an early example of industrial music. I'm in the latter camp, even though it's not an easy listen. My view is that if you can sit and listen to this in its entirety, there is little or nothing in the world of music that's not possible to take. It's certainly helped me become a bit more objective when listening to anything. In fact, over the years, I've come to like it, not only for its sound, but also by the way it destroys the myth that a band or performer has to churn out the same old, in the strange belief that they are obliged to be loyal to their fans rather than do whatever they feel like doing at the time. Fifth, Spare S. Annie and Other Tales by William S. Burroughs and the Disposable Heroes of Hip-Hoperacy. Released in 1993, this is author William S. Burroughs reading extracts from some of his books to a backdrop of hip-hop provided by the Disposable Heroes of Hip-Hoperacy. It's an unusual combination, but works really well. The spoken extracts come from a variety of books such as Nova Express, Interzone and The Naked Lunch, and are suitably bizarre. A particular favourite is Dr. Benway Operates, where the named character performs cardiac massage in a toilet using a plunger. Crazy and funny like much of the album. It's not all madness though. There's also a little room for some pathos in The Junkie's Christmas. The tempo of the music excellently matches the rhythm of Burroughs speaking, and the beats don't get in the way of hearing what is being read. Overall, an album demonstrating Burroughs' great imagination and the fact that hip-hop, like any other genre, doesn't have to be hopelessly formulaic. Sixth is Sick Love by VVM. From 2000, Sick Love by VVM, whose real name is Leyland Kirby, is an example of what's known as plunderphonics. It's the act of sampling recognisable pieces and, as is the case on this album, heavily distorting them in order to make something that gains an identity all of its own. Some of the tracks sampled on Sick Love end up being downright sinister. Berlin's Take My Breath Away, which for the purposes of this album is entitled Take My Beef Away, is especially so. Krista Burr's The Lady in Red, here subtitled Is Dancing with Meat, is another, although I'd argue there's something a bit creepy about the original anyway. Among other tracks and performers getting mutilated are Blue Eyes by Elton John, Forever and Ever by Demis Roussos, Imagine by John Lennon, Mamma Mia by ABBA, and Angels by Robbie Williams. To describe this as an irreverent album would be an understatement. I find it amusing, almost painful at times. Seventh is Dirty Fan Mail by Johnny Trunk and Whisby. This is more a comedy album than a music one, although there are some tunes. The premise of the album from 2002 is the reading of a collection of fan letters to British soft porn models at the end of the 1990s. Whisby reads the letters using a range of characterised voices, including impersonations of Kenneth Williams and Michael Caine. The reading is done verbatim, so the mix of the desperately sad and sordid fantasies of the letter writers, the terrible spelling, and Whisby's characterisations make for something that is extremely funny. Track titles taken from the letters themselves, like I Am a Pervert, Female Bum Conscious Aware, Suck You Out, and My Big Rising Willy, don't make you work hard to imagine what they might be about. If you've ever listened to the Derek and Clive albums by Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, I think you'll like this one. 8th is Petra Haden Sings The Who Sell Out by Petra Haden. The distinguishing characteristic about this album is that it's sung a cappella, and not just the lyrics. Instrument sounds, the jingles which featured on the Who's album, and even the locked groove at the end of it are all supplied by Petra Haden's voice. It's the sort of thing that I suspect might be seen as sacrilege by the Who's more devoted fans, which would be a shame because I don't think Petra Haden is trying to send the original album up. The Who Sell Out attempted to be imaginative when it was released, and Petra Haden's take on it comes across as trying to exhibit similar imagination. This album was released in 2005, and her discography since bears this out, as she's done a lot of other a cappella versions of well-known songs. 9th is Breath of Fire by Arrington D. Dionisio. Arrington D. Dionisio is an American musician who has released albums employing experimental, ethnic and jazz styles, amongst others. On his Breath of Fire album from 2006, the liner notes say that he used voice, bass clarinet, copper kettle, newspaper and Siberian kamuz, a type of jaw harp. Definitely not an altogether commonplace set of instruments to be using. What really brings it into the realms of the oddball, though, is the fact that the predominant vocal style is tooth and throat singing, and at times this is done over the clarinet's mouthpiece, which also makes for a strange sound. There are other vocal improvisations as well, including lip trilling on the final track, Paper, Fire, Raven, Baby. It's an album which on first listen has a real what the hell is this type quality, but like any album which initially doesn't seem to make sense, repeated listens enable you to start piecing together an unusual jigsaw. Last, but by no means least, Giant Man, Giant Plan by Cosmic Dennis Greenidge. This album is, in a word, bonkers. Cosmic Dennis Greenidge indeed has a plan, or at least he did when this was released in 2008. He wants to work for one of the major video game manufacturers, and in effect, this is like an audio CV demonstrating his imagination and potential for being able to write snappy jingle-type songs. On Giant Man, Giant Plan, the majority of the tracks, there are over 60, are him singing over pre-recorded electro-pop songs on a cassette player. You get plenty of clunking sounds as he starts and stops the tape. He hasn't got a great voice, and the lyrics are a little basic. I'm being generous, by the way. A large number of the song titles and lyrics feature characters or settings he's invented which he feels would be great in video games. For example, The Amazing Colossal Cucumber Man, Jimmy Jammers, Lavender Castle, Invasion of the Beetroot People, Gigabudders, The Sandwich Giant, and Spaghetti Yeti. If there were any justice in this world, he would not only have got a job with Sega, by now he'd be the CEO. And there you have it, 10 Oddball albums. If you've never heard any of them before, get out there and treat yourself. Usually this sort of stuff is cheap on places like Discogs, Music Magpie and Amazon Marketplace. I'll be doing another Oddball Albums video at a later date. Here's the usual closing bit though. Regardless of whether you liked or disliked this video, please give it a thumbs up or down, and any comments left, positive or negative, would be greatly appreciated. If you want to be notified when I next release a video, please click on the subscribe button, and if you've made it this far, thank you for watching.